First of all, many felt this decision was clearly necessary today. Question is, does it go far enough?
It was never a question of whether the bank's Monetary Policy Committee, the 9 economists, would raise rates today. It was always a question of by how much, Darren. They've raised rates by as little as they could have, really. A lot of people thought there'd be a 0.5% rise. It was only a 0.25% rise, as you just said.
Because the Feds, of course...
Indeed, the most important central bank in the world, the US Federal Reserve, raised interest rates by 0.75% yesterday in a bid to really bear down on inflation. Now, look, GBNews viewers and listeners will know some of them will have variable rate mortgages. Many of them will have personal debts. Interest rate rises are painful, but most economists would agree that if you have to choose between a slowdown and inflation, you'd go for the slowdown because inflation is the worst evil. If inflation starts to get really high, and we're closing in on double digits, as you just indicated, the Bank of England is saying today that inflation will go up to 11% this autumn, as some of us have been predicting for some time, then if you start to get inflation expectations built in where everybody thinks prices will go up, so firms put their prices up, people bid for higher wages, you can then get to 15, 20% inflation. Investment then dries up. The cost of living crisis gets really, really bad because wages start to lag behind very, very seriously. So we're at the cusp of sort of bearable inflation now. So many people would say the Bank of England should have really gone for it and really crushed this inflation with at least a 0.5 percentage point rise, perhaps even more.
But why not, though? What's the thinking? What do you think the thinking is inside the MPC where they didn't go that far?
It's interesting. The MPC, the Monetary Policy Committee, you got the governor, Andrew Bailey. You've got a chunk of sort of internal Bank of England appointments. Then you've got the external appointments who are meant to be a bit more independent. And out of the 9 people, all 3 of the externals voted for a 50 basis point, as we say, a 0.5% increase, and the internals voted for a 0.25% increase. So the internals tend to be more cautious. There's a lot of groupthink at the Bank of England. You've been listening to me for a long time. I'd have raised interest rates last summer. Yeah. I've been saying since last summer.
And we've heard from Mervyn King and others who've been very critical.
Former governor of the Bank of England, very respected, saying that the Bank of England should have moved faster.
Which is interesting, given the fact that obviously Andrew Bailey's very aware of, and other MPC members are very aware of the fact that there is criticism that they have not gone fast enough, that they're still not willing.
So they're obviously not stupid people. Yeah. They're obviously highly educated people. The reason they've been cautious is there are 2 reasons. One reason is that the economy has been slowing anyway. We had a preliminary GDP number out, gross domestic product, showing that the economy, or suggesting, and they can be revised, that the economy contracted in April as it contracted in March. There's also been a sense for many years now, pretty much since the global financial crisis, that stocks and shares and bond markets around the world, they've been kind of pumped up with printed money. They've been overvalued, bloated. And if you start if you start raising interest rates, then financial markets could correct, as we say in the jargon. They could, have a proper downward leg, a systemic collapse, which would obviously be a bit like 2008 and cause lots of problems everywhere. So there has rightly been some caution exercised in terms of not upsetting financial markets and not slowing down the economy unduly. But for my money, the Bank of England has underplayed their power today. They should have raised interest rates by more, in my view. And then the exchange rate comes into effect, Darren, because if the Bank of England is raising rates more slowly than the dollar, the US and other parts of the world, the pound weakens because they're not getting such a return on those pound investments. And if the pound weakens, and we've seen some weakening today, though admittedly in the last hour or so the pound's slightly regained some of that. But if the pound is weak, then our imports are more expensive. That pushes up inflation again. Yeah. So I would have gone for a much bolder interest rate rise, and I think the Bank of England will come under some criticism in the days to come because of that.